Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, let me give you a quick rundown on how the show works. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we build fun and inexpensive focused commander decks. A focused commander deck is more tuned than a casual deck, but not quite to the level of a competitive or optimized deck. Today's episode, though, is going to be a special one where we feature a super budget deck. So what exactly do I mean by a super budget deck? Well, typically we build our decks with a $25 budget, that's $25 for 100 cards. However, with this deck, we're going to challenge ourselves even further by limiting our budget to only $15. But before we get started, make sure you go hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay up to date with the latest Commander's Quarters deck techs. Today's super budget deck tech is going to be built around Shu Yun, the Silent Tempest. Shu Yun is a 3/2 human monk that costs 2 and a blue. He also has prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay Boros. If you do, target creature gains double strike until the end of the turn. Now this commander can be built around in a couple different ways, but the way that I decided to go about it was a Voltron strategy that focused solely on Shu Yun. Shu Yun's abilities are incredible. Prowess is a fantastic ability to have on a creature because he gets pumped anytime we cast a non-creature spell. And on top of that, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we can just give Shu Yun double strike by just paying 2 mana. This means that we just have to get Shu Yun's power up to 11 in order to kill someone with double strike. So what's our strategy for this deck? Well, we want to cast as many non-creature spells as we can and activate Shu Yun's ability. So these non-creature spells are going to be a combination of pump spells, evasion spells, and protection spells. We want to make sure that we're not only just pumping his power, but also protecting him and making sure he can get through. So how do we win with this deck? Well, we want to kill each and every opponent with one punch if possible. Shu Yun has gotten the nickname of One Punch Man because he can kill our opponents with just one hit. Sometimes it might take 2 hits to kill some of our opponents, but it really shouldn't take any more than that. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to break this deck down into 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how you're going to win with it. Let's go on to tactic number 1, Pet Rock. Now with this budget, we won't be able to get Shu Yun out before turn 3, but we can get some things set up for him. And with 3 colors in this deck, it's important that we can fix our mana. So we're going to be running things like Chromatic Sphere, which costs 1, we can pay 1 and tap to sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool and draw a card. Then there's Terrarian, which also costs 1, it enters the battlefield tapped and we can pay 2 to sacrifice it to add 2 mana and any combination of colors to our mana pool, and when it's put into the graveyard, we get to draw a card. These are very cheap non-creature spells that even if we have to cast them after Shu Yun's already out, are going to help us pump them. On top of that, each of them draws a card, so that's great for this deck. Then there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which costs 1, we can pay 2 and sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land and put into play tapped. Next up, we're running Izzet Signet, Boros Signet, and Azorius Signet, each of which comes in really handy for this deck in helping us ramp and fix our mana. Then there's Star Compass, which costs 2, enters the battlefield tapped, and we can tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool that a basic land we control could produce. Sphere of Suns costs 2 and enters the battlefield tapped with 3 charge counters on it. We can tap it to remove a charge counter from Sphere of Suns to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Finally, there's Corrupted Graphstone, which costs 2, also enters the battlefield tapped, and we can tap it to choose a color of a card in our graveyard, and then add 1 mana of that color to our mana pool. Again, since we are a 3-color deck, it is important that we can fix our colors, but it's also important that we get these things out early since Shu Yun costs 3 and we don't want to be playing Mana Rocks on turn 3. So after we get Shu Yun out, what are some of those spells that we want to play? Let's go see some of them in tactic number 2, Dirty Bulking. Defiant Strike is going to give Shu Yun +1/+0 until the end of the turn, and we're going to draw a card. Now this is a tiny effect, it's only going to pump him 1, but again, he has prowess, so it's basically going to pump him 2. And again, drawing cards is huge for this deck. We need to make sure that we still have enough gas to kill all of our opponents. Next up is Fever Charm, and we can choose one of 3 modes. We can give target creature haste until the end of the turn, target creature +2/+0 until the end of the turn, or it's going to deal 3 damage to target wizard. Now the vast majority of the time we are just going to give Shu Yun +2/+0, but having that option to give him haste can also be huge. Next up we've got Rouse the Mob, which gives target creature +2/+0 and trample until the end of the turn. Rush of Adrenaline is slightly better since it gives target creature +2/+1 and trample until the end of the turn. Then there's Seething Anger, which gives target creature +3/+0 until the end of the turn, and we can buy it back for 3. Borrowed Hostility has 2 different modes on it, and we can escalate it for free, but we pretty much are never going to do that. It can either give target creature +3/+0 or First Strike until the end of the turn. Pretty much every single time we're going to be giving Shu Yun +3/+0 with this card. Then there's Reckless Charge, which is going to give target creature +3/+0 and haste until the end of the turn. We can also flash it back for 2 and a red, so this card comes in huge. Next up we have some of the best pump spells in this deck, starting with Titan Strength. Titan Strength is going to give target creature +3/+1 until the end of the turn, and we get to scry 1. Then there's Brute Force, which is going to give target creature +3/+3 until the end of the turn. Built to Smash does the exact same thing, except the creature has to be attacking. Next up is Brute Strength, which gives target creature +3/+1 and trample until the end of the turn. Run Amok is going to give target attacking creature +3/+3 and trample until the end of the turn. Then there's Fist of the Anvil, which will give target creature +4/+0 until the end of the turn. Invigorated Rampage does the exact same thing, except it's going to give that same creature trample. It also has a second mode on it, but we're never going to use that since Shu Yun is the only creature in this deck. Finally, we've got Artful Maneuver, which is a spell that has rebound, and it's going to give target creature +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Rebound is one of the best mechanics for this deck. When we cast a spell with Rebound from our hand, we can exile it as it resolves, and then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast that spell from exile without paying its mana cost. This is especially good in this deck since Shu Yun has prowess. So when we cast Artful Maneuver the first time, it's basically going to give Shu Yun +3/+3. And then the next turn we get to cast it for free and give Shu Yun another +3/+3. Overall, this one spell that just costs 2 mana is going to give Shu Yun +6/+6 over 2 turns. Alright, so we've talked about some instants and sorceries that are amazing in this deck to help us pump Shu Yun. Let's go into some other types of cards in tactic number 3, minor side effects. So we want our spells to have as low of a cost as we can so we can cast as many non-creature spells in a turn as possible. We also want spells that help pump Shu Yun's power up as much as we can as quickly as possible. So some of these auras that we're going to go through might have some benefits, but they also might have some drawbacks too. Taste for Mayhem is going to give Shu Yun +2/+0, and if we're Hellbent, it's going to give him an additional +2/+0. Then there's Dust Corona, which is going to give Shu Yun +2/+0, and he can't be blocked by creatures with flying. Next is Furor of the Bitten, which is going to give our commander +2/+2, but he has to attack each turn if able. With this deck, though, that's not really a drawback because we pretty much always want to be attacking. Then there's Tangarth's Rage, which is going to give enchanted creature +3/+0 if it's attacking, otherwise it gets -2/-1. But since this is 1 mana for 3 power, we are willing to make this trade-off. Speaking of 1 mana for 3 power, we're getting to some of our best auras of the deck. Consuming Fervor and Unstable Mutation are pretty much the exact same card. Both of them are auras that are going to give Shu Yun +3/+3, and at the beginning of our upkeep we have to put a -1/-1 counter on Shu Yun. Now if the game lasts long enough, these can actually kill our commander. But this deck really isn't meant for an extended game anyway, and these cards are amazing at putting the pressure on our opponents. 3 is actually the magic number for this deck. What I mean by that is it only takes 2 spells that pump Shu Yun by 3 each in order to kill our opponents with 1 hit. So again, Shu Yun starts off with 3 power. If we cast the first spell, it's going to give Shu Yun +4/+4 because of prowess. Then if we cast our second 3-pump spell, it's going to put him at 11 power, and we can activate his own ability to give him double strike so he'll be hitting for 22 damage. With this deck, we can kill as early as turn 4. And if we can get a Mana Rock out ahead of time, we can basically ensure that kill by giving him some form of evasion. Let's go through some of those forms of evasion in tactic number 4, Pardon Me. Panic is somewhat of a strange card. We can only play it during combat before blockers are declared. But it's going to make it so that target creature can't block this turn, and we get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Renegade Tactics is much simpler. It's going to make target creature not be able to block this turn, and we get to draw a card. Next up is Niveus Wisp, which is going to make target creature white until the end of the turn, and it's going to tap that creature, and we get to draw a card. All these cards basically remove a blocker, and we get to draw a card, so there are fantastic cards in this deck. Now sometimes we can't necessarily get around all of the blockers, but we can get over the blockers. Crash Through is going to give our creatures trample until the end of the turn, and we get to draw a card. And then Mob Mentality is an aura that's going to give Shu Yun trample. It's also basically going to give him +1/+0 whenever he attacks. Cloak of Feathers and Leap basically do the exact same thing. They're going to give Shu Yun flying until the end of the turn, and we get to draw a card. Cartouche of Knowledge is going to give our commander +1/+1 and flying, and when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Finally, there's Defy Gravity, which is going to give target creature flying until the end of the turn, and it's got Flashback. Much like Rebound, Flashback is huge for this deck. Being able to get the same effect twice over separate turns is great. And on top of that, this card is going to trigger Prowess twice. Now these cards are great at helping us get our commander damage through, but there's some other cards that help us do it even better. Let's check them out in tactic number 5, Slip on By. Slip Through Space is going to make target creature unblockable until the end of the turn, and we're going to get to draw a card. Shadow Rift is pretty much going to do the exact same thing since most players don't run creatures with Shadow. Then there's Artful Dodge, which gives target creature unblockable until the end of the turn, and it's got Flashback. Again, Flashback is huge for this deck since we can basically give our commander unblockable for 2 turns. Then we've got Aqueous Form, which is an aura, and it says enchanted creature can't be blocked, and whenever it attacks, we scry 1. Permanently making Shu Yun unblockable is huge, and being able to filter out our draws definitely helps too. Next up is the Golden Pig of the deck, which as a reminder is the number 1 card out of the 99. Distortion Strike is an amazing card in this deck, and more than earns the title of the Golden Pig. Distortion Strike gives target creature +1/+0 until the end of the turn, and it can't be blocked this turn, and it also has Rebound. So let's break this down really quick. With Prowess, this is going to give Shu Yun +2/+1 until the end of the turn, and he can't be blocked. Then, at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast this card for free, giving Shu Yun another +2/+1 and can't be blocked until the end of the turn. So over 2 turns, it's going to give Shu Yun a total of 4 power, and he can't be blocked on either of those turns. And it's going to do all of this for just 1 mana. This card is insane in this deck and can easily help us kill 2 opponents in a row. That's why it's the best card out of the 99, and it more than earns the title of the Golden Pig. So we've talked about pumping our commander and giving him evasion, but now we've got to protect him. It's time to go into tactic number 6, Safe and Sound. First up, there's going to be Faith Shield, which gives target permanent we control protection from the color of our choice until the end of the turn. On top of that, if we have 5 or less life, it's going to give all of our permanents protection from that color. Then there's God's Willing, which is going to give target creature we control protection from the color of our choice until the end of the turn, and we get to scry 1. Apostle's Blessing is going to give target artifact or creature we control protection from artifacts or from the color of our choice until the end of the turn. This is actually the easiest protection spell that we have to cast since it has a Phyrexian mana in it. Next up is Shelter, which is going to give target creature protection from the color of our choice until the end of the turn, and we get to draw a card. So while this card does cost 1 more, drawing that card makes up for it. Finally, we've got Emerge Unscathed and Center Soul, which basically do the exact same thing, but Center Soul costs us 1 more to cast. They're going to give target creature protection from the color of our choice until the end of the turn, and they have Rebound. So these cards can come in huge, and being able to protect Shu Yun for 2 turns in a row. The best part about all these protection spells is that they're twofold in this deck. In one way, they can protect Shu Yun from any spells that come at him of a certain color. And the other way is that we can use them offensively. If an opponent only has creatures of one color, we can just give him protection from that one color, and then he's unblockable to them. Now there is a downside to protection spells in this deck. If one of our auras is attached to Shu Yun, we can't give him protection from the color of that aura unless we're willing to lose that aura. That's one of the main reasons that we're running more instants and sorceries than auras in this deck. Now let's move on to some spells that don't negatively impact us but can still protect Shu Yun. It's time to go into tactic number 7, Unbreakable. Ajani's Presence is going to give our commander +1/+1 and indestructible until the end of the turn. Sheltering Light will also give him indestructible, but it's also going to let us scry 1. And then with Valorous Stance, we have 2 options. We can either give target creature indestructible until the end of the turn, or we can destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. Then there's Intervene, which is going to counter target spell that targets a creature. And finally, we're running Turn Aside, which is going to counter target spell that targets a permanent we control. Both of these are pretty much going to do the exact same thing, since most of the time we're going to be trying to protect Shu Yun. While these spells don't necessarily have the versatility of those protection from color spells, they don't negatively impact us by removing our auras. Now let's go through some cards quick that provide us some utility in tactic number 8, a little off the top. Opt is going to let us scry 1 and then draw a card. This will not only help us dig deeper, but it's also going to trigger Prowess. Then we've got Faithless Looting, which is going to make us draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. We can also flash it back for 2 in a red. This card helps us dig deeper into our deck, and it's going to trigger Prowess twice. Next up is Frantic Search, which is a huge card for this deck. Frantic Search is going to have us draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and then we untap 3 lands. So this card's basically going to help us dig deeper and trigger Prowess for free. Finally, we're running Expedite and Crimson Wisps, which are basically the exact same thing. Basically, they're both going to give our commander haste until the end of the turn, and we get to draw a card. Early on, if we have an extra mana open when we cast Shu Yun, it's always a good idea to get a quick attack in. And then later in the game, if Shu Yun dies and we recast him, giving him haste will help us get right back on it. Now there are some situations that we can't necessarily deal with by just smashing people's faces with Shu Yun. Let's go over some of those cards that can help us out though in tactic number 9, Situational Supplies. Fragmentize is going to destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 4 or less. Again, for this deck we want spells to be as cheap as possible for us to cast, so having Fragmentize only cost 1 comes in huge. Then we've got Void Snare, which is going to return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand for only a blue. Most of the times, it's not going to matter that they can recast it next turn because there won't be a next turn for them since we just kill them in 1 turn anyway. That's the great thing about Shu Yun, he's just truly the one-punch man and can just finish people off right away. Now sometimes we will get disrupted and the game will go on a little longer than we want it to, but that's where we go into tactic number 10, the long game. Inquisitor's Flail is an equipment that has, if equipped creature would deal combat damage, it deals double that damage instead. If another creature would deal combat damage to equipped creature, it deals double that damage to equipped creature instead. By equipping this to Shu Yun, we only have to get him up to 6 power in order to kill someone. This comes in handy later in the game if our hand is running very low. So even if we only have a spell that pumps him by 2 power, it's going to be 3 with Prowess, putting him at 6. Then we give him Double Strike, which is going to be 12 damage, and then this is going to double that, making it 24. This card really just helps us do more with less. Next up, we've got Scroll of the Masters, which is an artifact that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a lore counter on Scroll of the Masters. And then it has 3 tap, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn for each lore counter on Scroll of the Masters. If we get this thing down early, it's going to have a ton of lore counters on it. After a couple of turns, we just have to have this out as well as an evasion spell, and we pretty much can kill anyone. Then we've got Leering Emblem, which is an equipment that says whenever you play a spell, equipped creature gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Again, with this deck, we can cast a ton of spells very quickly, so Leering Emblem is going to pump Shu Yun up a ton. Finally, we've got Runechanter's Pike, which is an equipment that costs 2. It has equipped creature has first strike and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. The vast majority of our deck is instants and sorceries, and we're going to get a ton of those in the graveyard. Later in the game, this plus Double Strike can pretty much just kill any opponent. This deck is very quick and is a ton of fun. If our opponents don't respect the power of the One Punch Man, they're going to be sorry very quickly. But now that we've gone through the cards that help us win with this deck, let's go through the cards that help make it happen. It's time to go on to the mana base. We're going to be running 33 lands in this deck, including Mystic Monastery, which enters the battlefield tapped and can tap for any one of our colors. Then there's Exotic Orchard, which can tap to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Then we've got Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both of which can tap to sacrifice themselves to search our library for a basic land and put into play tapped. Boros Guildgate, Stone Quarry, and Windscarred Crag all enter the battlefield tapped and can tap for either a red or a white. And on top of that, when Windscarred Crag enters the battlefield, we gain 1 life. Highland Lake, Izzet Guildgate, and Swiftwater Cliffs each enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either a blue or a red, and Swiftwater Cliffs will even gain us a life. Then we're running Azorius Guildgate, Coastal Tower, Meandering River, Sejiri Refuge, and Tranquil Cove, each of which enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either a white or a blue. On top of that, Sejiri Refuge and Tranquil Cove both gain us a life when they come into play. Finally, we're going to be running 18 basic lands, including 10 mountains, 4 plains, and 4 islands. And now that we've gone through every single card in the deck, let's do a quick price check. As always, our deck costs are calculated using TCG Player Optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damage cards, because those cards need a home too. The average Goreclaw EDHREC deck is going to set you back $138.10. Let's see how we compare to that. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at only $14.92. Again, each and every single Commander's Quarters deck is built to be tuned and focused within its budget restriction, but there are always ways to improve those decks. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades to see what some of those ways just might be. First off, there's Ponder that comes in at $1.49. Ponder is a sorcery that's going to let us look at the top 3 cards of our library, then put them back in any order, and we can shuffle our library if we want to, and then we draw a card. Again, this deck loves cantrips, and this is one of the best ones around. Next up is Serum Visions, which comes in at $2.81. It's a sorcery that says, draw a card, scry 2. While it may not set itself up like Ponder does, it sets up our future draws. Then there's Preordain, which comes in at $3.25. Preordain says, scry 2, then draw a card. This is pretty much the exact opposite of Serum Visions, since it helps us set up our current draw. Again, since our commander has prowess, cantrips are very good in this deck. Next up, we've got Steel Shaper's Gift, which comes in at $5.15. Steel Shaper's Gift is a sorcery that says, search your library for an equipment card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a very powerful card in this deck since we're running 3 pieces of equipment that are amazing with Shu Yun. Then there's Mystical Tutor, which comes in at $5.12. It's an instant that says, search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal that card, shuffle your library, then put that card on top of it. This card is amazing at helping us find the exact card that we need for our situation. And since we're running a ton of cantrips in this deck, most of the time we could even draw that card in the same turn. And finally there's Swansong, which comes in at $2.99. Swansong is an instant that says, counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell, its controller creates a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. In my opinion, Swansong is one of the best cheap counters in the game. And while this does give them a 2/2 flyer, usually that doesn't matter to us and we can get around it anyway. Again, Shu Yun is a very powerful commander and a ton of fun to play. And if your opponents don't respect the One Punch Man, they'll be knocked out very quickly. And with that, our show is coming to a close, but I really want to hear about what you guys think about this deck, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure you're following us on both Twitter and Facebook so you can get some early hints on who the next commander just might be. You can find links to both our Twitter and Facebook in the description below. Also in the description below, you'll find a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron of the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a new general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. If you enjoyed this deck tech, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and check out some of our other deck techs. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again, and have a good one.